Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first meeting of the committee in the new municipal year. The first item is election of chair. Is there a nomination, please?
I'd like to nominate Catherine Glover.
Is there a seconder, please? Are there any other nominations? Okay. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we now have to elect a vice chair. Are there any nominations?
Oh, sorry. I'd like to nominate Mark Bruno Walker.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Martin seconded it. Okay, welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. Have we got any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Beth Rowland, Chair. Dave Edmonds, I believe, is joining on Teams, and Andrew Gray is running late from another meeting, and Mike Smith is here as a substitute.
Thank you. Okay, minutes of previous meeting. For those who were here at it. Page 5. Any comments on page 5? Sorry.
Just ask who Mike is substituting for. You didn't say that.
Beth.
Beth, okay.
Yeah, great. Beth was just taken poorly this morning. Okay. Minutes. Any comments on page 5? Page 6? Page 7? Page 8? Page 9? Page 10? Page 11? Page 12? Okay, can we have a show of hands from those who were here? Looks like everyone. That was here. That was carried. Yeah. Right. Are there any questions, Neil? Public or otherwise? Sorry. I skipped over that. Oh, yes. Has anyone got any declarations of interest in the agenda items? Nope. Are there any questions? No.
There are no questions of any type, Chair.
Lovely. Right. Let's get on with agenda item 9, page 15. Stephen.
Thank you. I will say a few words of introduction, but then hand over to Emily and Sarah for their comments, which will be more expensive than mine. I just really wanted to draw attention to the really challenging context within which you need to, I think, understand these key performance indicators. As you all know, we are experiencing a very significant reduction in our government funding, but that comes at the same time we're also experiencing the challenge of inflation, which is still significant, and a rising demand for our services. Our services continue to be much in demand, and the cost of delivering those services is going up. So this is an immensely challenging context within which you need, I think, to understand the overall performance. And in that broad context, I think it's a relatively welcome achievement that we've managed to see no increase in the number of red KPIs, although there's been a decrease in the greens and an increase in the ambers. you would normally expect there to be a bit of fluctuation in those areas. So overall, there are some quite positive things to highlight. And you can see those summarised on pages 15 and 16 of your agenda. And one, without in any way undermining the achievements of the others, one I wanted to highlight was in an area that we really are not equipped as a committee, or you're not equipped as a committee to interrogate, and that's children's services. But I would like to just draw attention to that new care leaver transitional housing and the importance of securing Homes England funding for that. And that the council has been very successful as a single authority in being able to get Homes England funding for important projects that help our residents. We've been more successful than any other Berkshire unitary council in securing Homes England grants and delivering affordable housing units. And the specialist accommodation we're referring to here is particularly valuable. It helps control future costs as well as meeting a very obvious need. So I'm not going to delay Sarah and Emily coming in and telling you a bit more detail about the report.
Thanks, Stephen. So this is the report for quarter 4 for 2025-26 and also the year end. So it's a roundup of the full year as well. Just to let you know that from quarter 1 of the next year, there will be some changes to the actual KPIs you're seeing. So each directorate has done a review of the KPIs that they're reporting. Some have made changes, others haven't. So there will be some new KPIs, there will be some amended ones, and we'll provide a list of what those are.
Yes, Pauline.
It was a question for Steve on his bit, actually. You talked about funding having had an effect. Now, obviously, the huge funding cut has yet to start, but we had a bit of a funding cut last year because I think they took $1 million off us. I'm just wondering what you think the impact of the big cut is, bearing in mind we've already had a little one, and it's obvious, and you're saying that's had an effect.
Yes, we did have a reduction in funding last year. We're going to have a much more substantial one this year, and still more substantial one the year after and the year after that. The year we're in now is the least painful of the 3 years of the new finance settlement, the so-called fairer funding settlement, which is neither fair nor provides funding. But we are undoubtedly going to face a much tougher time. But we do need to recognise even now we are under the cosh financially. We are clearly having a significant challenge with inflation, interest rates. Inflation, obviously, for us is not about headline figures of inflation. It's about inflation in particular costs, especially relating to things like social care costs, very considerable. And the increase in national insurance contributions last year didn't help us at all. Into our costs very considerably. And we do continue to have a rising demand for our services. And that demand is, because of inflation, more costly to meet. But it's also, in terms of social care, becoming more complex. And the cases are highly complex and very expensive, therefore, to deal with. A relatively small number of new cases of immense complexity can add enormously to the budget. I realise I've said all of that without my microphone on. I hope I'm not going to have to repeat it all. I'm not sure I have the energy.
Go on, Emily, sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. It was just to remind members that the sections of the report around children's services, adults, social care and public health, we need to refer those to the relevant committees. We also, our colleagues from Place and Growth send their apologies. They're not able to send a senior officer this evening. So anything that between us we can't answer, I have said I would take away and get written responses, if that's okay. Other than that, you can see that the 6 red KPIs on the cover report, they've been highlighted, but I'm happy to carry on and take questions on the report.
It's also, now I have remembered to put the microphone on, worth saying that at the moment we're retaining within Place and Growth housing and community safety, but those areas of council activity are actually, they've moved directorate into adult services. So in the future, we will see them as different KPIs or under a different directorate.
Okay. I suppose we've got to look at the general Q4 performance bit. Has anyone got any comments on that? Before. No, but sorry, pages 17, 18, 19, 20. Mike? There is a spare copy. Oh, right, sorry.
Yeah. Bottom of page 17, the KPI concerning percentage of total waste recycled, composted and reused. It says that we are down 1,300 tonnes on garden waste collected compared to the previous year. I've no idea how much 1,300 tonnes is relative to the total garden waste. Is it 5%, 10%, 20%? I'm wondering how much of this might be attributed to the price rises in the brown bin collections, and how many brown bins, how many fewer brown bins are we collecting, and does that relate? How does that relate to the 1,300 tonnes?
Well, there was more detail. There is more detail in the, and I seem to remember, that other members of the committee can remember from last year, that wasn't it because a lot of it was very dry? It was because it's weight and it was not as wet as it was the year before. I mean, I'm vaguely remembering that.
Because the grass didn't grow.
And that, yes. Well, it was dry and then, yes. So. Yeah, we can get more of a proper answer for you. But I do remember that being a factor. Shahid?
I think just related to that as well as the cost. I think a number of residents have mentioned the cost for that, the green waste has gone up considerably far beyond the inflation rate. And I think some people have stopped using that. So I think there'll be a number of things. And the question is always, why did the price go up so high? Obviously, inflation is, yes, understandable, but this is, I think, if I remember, it's for 3 times as much, probably not more than that. So that could be, obviously, everything impacts on top of other things which Stephen highlighted as well. Generally, the cost of living is going higher and higher, but if every bit of is going higher, a cumulative effect gets bigger and bigger. And also just on that side, right, I don't know whether it's relevant or not. The general waste which goes to people good, into civic, in Bracknell, for example. And I always thought that, before we had this appointment system, this was in COVID, and still the appointment system still is going on now. So the people have asked me, the number of residents have asked me, why do we have to still continue to make an appointment system. This was actually set in place for a specific reason, that was COVID. That is no longer any applicable now. Why do we still have the appointment system? Because now sometimes they look at it on the weekend, they want to pour and drop some stuff. It could be green waste as well, and the garden and appointment. There's no appointment, right? So I don't know if there's any valid reason for that, but I'd be interested to know.
Martin, did you want?
As a moderately frequent user, the appointments are actually quite quick, Shahid. I've been on in the morning and got one, an hour's time, which is about as quick. But it did cut out all that queuing. There was that used to get quite extensive queuing, where you would go on like most people would go on a Saturday or a Sunday, and of course you spend a long time there. Whereas with the appointments now, you're rarely in more than 2 or 3 cars in front of you. It's as quickly as they can process it. It's a quicker, easier process to do, I have to say.
Yeah, I think they have kept it because it works so well. It's not really much of an impediment to most people. So,
Just
but
highlight-
I think we ought to register the fact that we think it might be a factor.
I just highlighted the fact because a number of residents have mentioned to me that there is no. Yeah, I get what you're saying. But I mean, when I've gone now, is appointment system, I can't compare. But before even there was no appointment system, there's a couple of cars. It wasn't. I have never faced any queue because I'm quite a frequent user myself.
I think that's quite someone doesn't have access to a phone and the app, could be a bit frustrating to know that when you do turn up, if you've got your neighbour to book it for you and so on, you turn up and there's no queue anyway. Maybe we need some way of dealing with that that's a bit more flexible for people that don't have access to the online services.
I think, whilst I'm hearing the comments, I think CCOS probably will look at this when we look through the rest of the details, because it falls within our remit on that committee. I think also it's not, I think what we need to do, as Emily has said, is we'll get answers and come back. I think speculating on what the causes might be, whilst we need to understand what the causes might be, I think will be probably more useful. But I also remember anecdotally in Bracknell Forest, when you queue down towards Longshot Lane, I remember before the appointment system booking in, you turn up and queue all the way down Longshot Lane and onto Western Road. And the same at Smallmead. So I think looking at, not for this committee, but looking at how the appointment system's run, I don't get people saying I hate it anymore. I don't get people saying I don't want it anymore. I think people actually highly value it on the whole. I think we just need to make it, the amount of slots, the amount of people per slots, but now you don't queue. In the past, you would queue on a Saturday. If you picked the wrong time, you'd queue halfway down Longshot Lane. But I think for CCOS, we can look at it, and I think we need to get an answer back on what the root cause might be, or what sits behind that drop in the 1,300 tonnes, and then let that come back as an action.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, shall we get on to the main sections? Starting on page 25 with resources and assets. Hello, Andrew. Mike.
Just a point of clarification, really. There's so RA1 is about occupancy rate of WBC commercial property portfolio. I assume that doesn't include shoot-end unoccupied floors. I was just wondering whether or not there are any other council-owned premises that are not occupied, that are not included in this portfolio figure.
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify what we mean by the commercial property portfolio. So these are assets that have commercial tenants in them that are paying us rent. So we divide our property portfolio into two: our commercial portfolio, which are rental income generating, and what we call our corporate portfolio, which is where we're delivering our services from, and that would include shoot end. So RA1 is just on the commercial portfolio. The operational portfolio, we do have some vacancies, some
a vacant space where teams are moving around thinking about how they deliver their services, but that's not included in this reporting.
Mark?
Got two when I finished throwing my pen. Business rate collection, RA7, page 27. Is this a trend that is this a trend, or is this just seasonality? Is this blips? Is this something we need to be more concerned about as the health of the underlying businesses? And then I have a second question on RA9, which I think is me being pedantic.
I'll answer the first one. So the business rates collection, it is a trend. Our benchmarking is looking and seeing that we are following a local and a national picture. What we've also seen is where maybe during the year businesses have struggled to pay their business rates, we've been agreed payment plans with them, etc. And then they have then defaulted at the last moment. So the last quarter looks where we thought we had a plan. They then haven't been able to deliver on that plan in the last quarter, which is why it's going down. So, the collection rates are still high and they've only just missed the target, but we are seeing that, and we all know around that macroeconomic and that pressure point, this is a significant outgoing for businesses, and that might be an area they can't, but we're certainly not out of kilter with other local authorities.
Thank you. And then my pedantic one is on RA9, which is the number of data breaches reported to the ICO. So it looks like our performance has declined from 1 to 0. I know that's direction of travel, but I just wonder if we need, I'm not sure if I'm actually asking that question too, might be one we have to take away, but where we've only got 1 and it sticks out like a sore thumb, because it's it's an absolute number of 100% reduction or improvement, depending which way you want to have a look at it. I think some of the wording of that one as a KPI is a little strange. Our performance has declined. It's just a wording thing. I did warn you, it was me being pedantic.
But it's the year, isn't it the year that has declined, not the quarter?
It's the use of the word declined.
Oh, I see what you mean.
I did warn you. It's one of those ones that got some really weird wording that was...
That's fine, and I'll be slopey shoulders and say I need to go and take that back to Andrew, and we'll look at the wording.
However, we can understand the graph, so we can cope.
I must say, I found it, isn't this the first time we've looked at this style of chart at the end of the year, where we've got this direction of travel? So we've got the year end, but we haven't got the previous year end to compare it with. Am I right in thinking that, Neil? We've changed it?
Yes, so the style of the report changed, I think, last quarter. So yes, we won't have seen that through. Yeah.
So I found it a bit odd trying to, looking at the year end, that I haven't got the previous year end to compare it with. You have, yes. Yes, that's true. Yes. Caroline.
It's on council tax collection, RA6, I need my glasses on. Our collection rate is very good. The families that are struggling, do we continue to help them? We do, thank you.
We most definitely do, yes.
Mike.
To continue on Mark's point about the rates, government are now retaining 94% of everything we collect. So, and people are struggling, therefore it's taking more effort to collect it. Who's paying for the effort to collect it? No funds retained.
Well, I can answer that. We collect, but we then have to hand that over to government. We're a collecting agency. We hand that to government, and government returns to us. But it will be It will be 6% in the future. So we are not retaining the vast majority of that. That's correct. That's a significant increase in the
increase
retained
cost
by
of
central government.
in the face of people who are struggling and businesses struggling, we're having to put more effort in to collect it. So who is paying us for the effort? Are we doing it for the generosity of the government?
Well, I can't answer that, but I'm fairly confident that we're paying for it.
I'm sure we are.
Shahid,
Stephen, just to pick up the point, you're saying we don't keep vast amount of the business rate, but 6% is returned to us. So just to want to understand, so what we keep is 6% and no more than 6%, or how much, maybe the
yeah.
question is,
I mean, it's
clarification, how much of that actually comes back to us and how much do we retain,
Yeah.
as a council?
The language is a bit confusing because we talk about retained business rates. We in reality retain none of them. We just hand them to government and we are given back as a grant a portion of the business rates. That was, I think, 70% that the government retained before. It's now just going down to the government now will retain 94%. So this is a real blow to us. And of course, a lot of businesses paying their business rates expect it to help provide local services. But sadly, in our case, that's not so.
Actually, it's not. 6% is like just the collection fees, isn't it? You can say there's nothing returned back as such. I mean,
Well,
technically, not 6% is like any other agency who will do a particular kind of work, right? And they just keep that, whatever the cost is going to occur, that is your cost to actually collect the business rate. So I'm thinking there's nothing coming back to us as a council. That's our collection fee.
Well, I can't tell you how much it costs to collect and whether that would take up the whole of the 6%, but we clearly are not getting a very good deal out of the business rates. I think that's a fair, an important point to make.
Andrew.
I was just going to ask one on RA8, the freedom of information request. It was said that the demand for the freedom of information requests has gone up significantly. And do we know the nature of these, in the sense that is it a case that people are asking for freedom of information where actually a better mechanism would have been better? Because I mean, I know I have heard of things where, people want freedom of information of when their bin's going to get collected, when they, could look at it somewhere else. Is that the case, or are there quite deep? I mean, is it that people are just wanting to scrutinise things even further with those requests?
I suppose I can answer from a property perspective based on what the kind of FOI requests that we get into property. Some we get which are seeking, the majority are seeking further detail behind a decision. So it may be, that a paper's been, an executive paper has been published and a decision's been published, but they're seeking further information behind that. And I'd say probably the other half, probably at least 50%, are businesses touting for business and wanting to understand our contractual arrangements. Who do we have contracts with for various bits of work that we do? When are they coming up for renewal? What's the value of them, etc. And particularly for those ones, that's where the sort of AI generated freedom of information requests, we've definitely seen an increase. You can see it in the pattern, the terminology that's being used, the way the questions are asked. So yes, I think partly it's people seeking further information and justification for decisions, and partly there is a in the property world, there is a commercial element to that, and people seeking to be able to get our business.
And are most of those, are they valid FOI requests, or are there somewhere you just say we can't give you that information because that's sort of, I can't think of the word, sensitive, yeah.
So we do have some restrictions on information that we can put into the public domain, and we work with the freedom information team to just check that is valid. So where something is commercially sensitive, we can go back and respond on that basis. We can also respond if it's going to take a significant amount of time to respond. I think 18 hours is the kind of limit. So there are different ways, but overall our general approach is this is people seeking further information and we must provide it. Quite often we are able to respond by signposting them to where decisions have been made and the kind of discussions, etc. So we do quite a lot of that signposting, and part of what we're looking at is also, can we make sure that that information is easier for them to find, almost that they can self-serve, so that the default isn't put in an FOI. Actually, if I can look on the council website in a easy to understand way, I might find my answer rather than having to put in an FOI. But that's just that's just my experience from our area.
Yeah, I think that was going to come to my point, is that if the default is FOI, when actually some of that information can be found elsewhere. But I guess that links back to things like the searchability of the website and actually people knowing other appropriate avenues to get that information as well, because presumably FOIs are more time intensive to deal with than other, obviously if they just found it on the website, it'll be,
And there's also obviously a time limit to an FOI as well. So if somebody is seeking information within a specific time frame, they may use that mechanism as a way to, or think they may get a speedier response on. That's another way.
It's perhaps also just worth adding that in run-ups to elections, there are often politically motivated freedom of information requests that seek to uncover the background of things and require an enormous trawl through vast amount of email traffic, which can be incredibly time-consuming to reconstruct and sort out what's being required. And sometimes it's just not possible to meet those within the time limit, because you can easily use up 18 hours. Very easily. So that is a factor also.
I just wanted to ask something about this. Do we put much effort, how much effort do we put into avoiding, saying, well, this is something that gets asked every year or whatever. Could we put this on the website all the time, so to avoid them completely?
Yeah, again, just from properties perspective, what we do is we track the FOIs that we get in, and if we see a consistency of questions, then that means that people aren't finding the information themselves. So we then try and make sure that that's more available. Also, we track them because sometimes we get very similar questions. That helps with officer time as well, if we've got already a published response that we can point to. So there is absolutely learning from the types of questions that we get, because if that's the information people are seeking, can we make sure it's there easier? Sometimes that's just not possible, and sometimes they are very, very specific to a specific topic that no one's ever asked a question about before, and that's where we need to go.
Yeah, fair enough. Pauline.
Just to make a point in favour of FOIs, I find the FOI team are very good. They're very thorough, and you get a decent, proper, well thought out response, and you know you're going to get it. So I actually think they're probably more effective sometimes than asking a direct question of an officer. And the other advantage is that they're publicly available, so the answers are published, which means that anybody can see it rather than it just being a private chain. So I know that they're a pain, and I know that they take effort, but actually I think there's benefits to them as well as disbenefits.
Any more for this section? Right, let's go on. Place and growth on page, I'll read it, 50. Mike.
PG2, the number of households in emergency nightly let B&B accommodation. I was struggling to understand this until I read the footnote that says the quarter figures are effectively just the number of families in B&B on the last day of the quarter. So it doesn't represent what's going on during the quarter. And it doesn't reconcile itself at all with the full year figure, which on here is shown as 183. So it'd be much more useful if that KPI was a rolling annual or rolling 12-month basis, as noted on the last day of the quarter, because otherwise it's a completely meaningless KPI. The two don't relate to each other.
Well, I guess we should record that to get a written response.
Although it is perhaps just worth saying that performance in that area is actually, despite declines and improvements at various stages in the year, is actually pretty good. Our record on this is pretty good. We have managed to avoid large numbers of people in emergency accommodation, which is something we can be rather proud of.
But in the narrative, there's a 42% increase in the yearly total between last year and this year. So that can't be good.
Sorry, we are talking about very low numbers of figures, and very small numbers of people. I mean, if you look on page 57, look at our position compared with almost all of the other Berkshire unitaries. It's far, far better.
I mean, as Mike says, it's just a snapshot at the end of the quarter. They've actually got the numbers on a specific night, I assume. So 30 to 31 days in March, you'd know on each night how many people. The other interesting bit would be how many different people. Is it the same people for a week, or is it 7 different ones? And that might give a little bit more interesting information, I think.
No, I was going to say, I'm sure they do have that information, so we can find out and get a response from them.
Yeah, I think clearly the council pays for emergency accommodation, so it knows exactly how many people.
I was thinking just if that information is available, you don't necessarily, you've got your graph monthly, but somewhere, so if somebody wants to click and see what was the spread during the month, that should be doable.
I mean, it's obviously in the interests of the council financially to reduce reliance on emergency accommodation wherever possible, but it's also in the interests of our residents, crucially, because emergency accommodation is incredibly unstable. It takes people away from, often away from their areas of familiarity. It can disrupt children's education. It's really the last thing you want for people. But there are, unfortunately, some occasions where there is no alternative, but we try to limit that as much as possible.
Caroline.
Thank you. It's PG1 number of households for homeless. In the narrative, you talk about the new Renters' Right Acts and the availability of private sector properties. Have we started to see a fall in private properties?
Yes, it's a short answer. But there is undoubtedly regulatory changes, tax changes have reduced the number of private renters. That's undoubtedly the case.
Mike?
Yes, this is one of clarification. I think PG3 percentage of planning appeals 1, it says we won 78%, so 32 of 41. In the planning training, they talk about a rolling 10% as being the trigger figure for government getting interested. But I assume that 10% is a different figure, is it?
% figure relates to all appeals, and I'm not sure whether this does.
Stephen, I think if it helps, we've got planning reports coming to CCOS. I'm pausing because I think it's this month.
It is. It's later this month, I think.
And it was this one or the next one? But we've got a whole review at CCOS looking at, it's our annual, we're looking at. It's a good call.
Yeah, that would help, because I can't explain this at the moment.
Andrew?
I was just going to ask about, I think it's 7B, garden waste collection. It was more about the usefulness of this KPI. I mean, I'm just really wondering what this is telling us, and does it tell us more about the weather or the performance of the service? And if it is telling us more about the weather, then is it a valid KPI, or does it tell us?
Does it have limited utility? Yes. We had, strangely enough, this conversation just before you arrived. But and I think the weather is, I think we did agree that the weather was almost certainly a factor. But I think we also agreed that we probably needed to get some narrative that would actually help us to understand this. Because at the moment we could speculate, but we're not probably in a great position to be able to definitively say what the explanation is.
Because I think on a slightly more, I guess, more serious point with it, if we are using it to assess the quality of service, obviously with the new garden waste coming in, I think that would have been beyond this quarter, wouldn't it? So we will potentially see the changes, but I'm thinking if we do see a change, can we definitively say that whether it's positive or negative, to do with the new service, or is there a way of excusing it because of the weather? If
I think you're raising a really important point. We can see changes, but we can't always know what causes them. And there's a combination of things that may influence them. And actually differentiating between those is incredibly difficult. So I think you're right. And I think your general point about, how much control do we have over some of these KPIs is also a very important point. We certainly don't have any control over the weather, but crime statistics. There's a very obvious point that we are not the primary agency for dealing with crime. We work with others who have a much bigger role to play, and yet KPIs have been used historically as a way of judging performance on crime rate, and how much influence we actually have over that is really questionable. So I think you're making a really important point.
I think the other point with garden waste is what happens to the garden waste that isn't recycled? Does it just get left in people's gardens? Does it get fly tipped? Or burnt? Yes, exactly. So, I mean, it's...
Or composted. Or composted.
Well, that's what I
we
meant,
don't know. It may be used in gardens to increase their...
Yeah, or fly tipped. So there's a huge can of worms, may I say. Huge compost heap of problems.
Just to say that we have this discussion of green waste about the KPIs every single time they come up, and that's why the green waste is separated, because there's so many things that impact it apart from actually the performance of the council, which is why it's not in the same KPI, and that's what we decided to do a while ago. We've discussed this at least 10 times, that I can remember.
Okay, let's move on to something else.
Just one, perhaps the KPI needs to be revised to who would like their green waste taken away, and how many people's green waste we take away when they want it taken away. Because I've got one councillor whose bin wasn't taken away, and he's mightily upset. He's very keen on it, but maybe rethinking what the KPI measures. It's our efficiency, not nature.
Alison, then Shahid.
I think a lot of people are thinking that we have had changes to garden waste collection with the increased price subscription, and also the need to book to have your paper sack collected. And I just wanted to ask if I think corporate and community, if they will be looking at that obviously a lot later in the year to see the difference between this year and last year and what that means.
Absolutely. I think we talked about this 2 meetings ago, the last meeting before this new system went live, and yeah, it'll be, I want to say 6 months after launch, at the end of the year, so December, January time, but definitely.
Just an observation. I mean, we talk about green waste being fly tipped, because we're cutting grass less frequent, and obviously grass in certain places is quite big. It's so easy to actually throw stuff in and nobody will know about it. I'm just thinking of going on A4, for example. Going from on A4 all the way, going towards Twyford, big, obviously on A4 in the middle. There's a huge, massive, you can't see the other side. But it's so easy to actually people to throw stuff there. So I'm just thinking, yes, we are letting the grass longer, but but it just makes life easier for the people to, and because nobody will notice it as well if it's even thrown. So we're making life easier for them to, okay, you just do it and get away with it as well.
Yes.
It's
Okay.
right
I
tipping
think
in
we're
the
getting.
fast lane of the A4 may be a slightly hazardous invention.
I think we're getting a bit away from the KPIs.
Moving on.
So, any more on place and growth? Mr. Connect.
It's the
Yeah.
PG10.
Yeah.
Antisocial behavior. Look at, obviously, it says it's a seasonal. First quarter is more because the weather may be nice, right? And then it's less, right? Obviously, this is for last year. Is that same thing? I'm just wondering in the previous years as well? Or is that, obviously, this antisocial behavior has been an issue, and certainly it was in the, and highlighted by a lot of, even the businesses as well. So I'm not sure whether there's any comparison to the previous year. Is that same sort of figures or similar? Is it increase or decrease in terms of?
I think it's similar, but we can go back to previous year's reports and get the exact trends for you.
It is undoubtedly seasonal, though. There is a seasonality to this. And obviously, if you have warm, long days, you have more problems.
You're right, but also it's a big issue as well for a lot of people, and it just shows if it's same numbers and high numbers, especially you got 7, it's almost like 800. I mean, a lot of elderly people, for example, feel very vulnerable. They don't feel scared to go out in a certain places as well. So the bigger question is, what is being done? What is being done? Is it having impact or not? And if not, then, certainly we need to talk to the other authorities who, to get this reduced, because it creates a lot of fear amongst certain communities.
Yeah, I think we all accept that and understand that good work is being done by our ASB team. And I think it is quite important to recognise that these figures are quite complex, the way they're compiled, and I think it would be useful to get a bit more clarity on some of that.
Can we move on to the Chief Executive Officer? Oh, sorry. Was it? Oh, it's 87. Oh, I've got 87. 86, 87. 87 is invisible. Page number.
Actually, it's just an observation on CEX3 with a customer satisfaction for the web. I know we're looking at customer contact at some point at CCOS as well, but I just wonder if there's any correlation of search results, etc., people's ability to find information on the website and then the resulting FOI requests to find data they can't find. Just wonder if that can be not answered now, but when we look at it through CCOS picked up.
Yeah, I'm sure the team will be happy to provide you with what information you ask for.
Pauline?
I had a very interesting conversation with Sally about that last week, because I think when you're looking for stuff on the website, you can't really find it using the corporate search sometimes, but actually ChatGPT's search does find it. And I'm just wondering if over time, the way people search will change sufficiently that we don't need to have a search on our own website. We use somebody else's engine to do it. Just an observation.
That also applies to Google on some sites. I don't know about this one.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Google is the same.
I was going to say, I think it goes back to that same point, because I spent half my life looking at SEM and agentic search. I think more people are just, if you're looking at people's as consumer habits, people won't go to a website to find the information. They'll just open a browser and search it, and they're all using agentic search. So more and more of our website needs to be fully spiderable, fully searchable, fully identifiable, because people aren't. I mean, I wanted to find, as an example, I was on a licensing panel today, and I wanted to find a particular piece of information, and I tried to find it in our own search browser on our own website and couldn't find it in the way I wanted to find it. But when I asked the same question of, Google, other platforms are available, it gave me a whole slew of information and other things that are relevant and some other things that came up. So I think when we're looking at this from the kind of digital transformation perspective, I think how people are searching is changing rapidly, and we're seeing that through, search results and everything else.
So that was the point I was trying to make to Sally was,
Yeah.
Actually, if people are not using our search as much, then maybe we should change how we configure the website so we don't actually have a search even, and just let Google do the work.
Or how do we use search better on our own website using agentic? But I think it's more the other way. It's more about making your site searchable externally.
Yeah, exactly. I think it is. I think the world has changed. The only thing is that you have to really be careful about what sometimes these search engines come back with, because they don't always get it right. In fact, sometimes they make stuff up. So, you need to check the sources as well.
Shahid?
I think the point has been made, but I think other way to also is to, a lot of the companies are doing is linking the other tools with the website as well. So when you do a search, it's not just a pure search, but also using other tools, and they are embedded within your website as well. So rather than looking outside, you can build that, embed that ChatGPT or whatever you want, for example, with your website. So it does a thorough search of within your website, but also actually can bring it from outside as well. So that's again, a lot of companies are doing that.
I think that's coming back to CCOS. I can't remember when, but it's on the forward work program somewhere, looking at impact of AI.
Have we said all we've got to say on this then? Mike?
I was interested in CEX6, which is the sickness absence reported on a rolling 12-month basis. And apart from Q2, it's all in red. That's 7.6 or so days of sick leave taken per member of staff. In HR, there's something called the Bradbury score, which indicates whether or not people are taking off. It looks at the amount of time people are taking off in consecutive periods. I just wonder whether that's another area of KPIs we could look at, because it gives an indication of whether there's a problem. with a particular member of staff or whether it's a general problem across the pitch. I must say, when I was in commercials, when I worked for a real living, we used to allow 10 days before we got worried about it per staff member.
I also looked at it, I wasn't in personnel or anything like that, but I was aware of the issue of sickness. It struck me that maybe we've got a KPI which we're never going to achieve because it's out of alignment. And you'd need a lot more granularity about which particular staff grade. I mean, I don't want to be, but the pilots were very rarely sick, but the cabin crew were sick more frequently. And a friend of mine who worked for a very large ICL in the day said that it exactly mirrored their experience. If you look at the grades and the jobs people are doing, you can start drawing a graph about expected sickness. Not to say that anybody here is, swinging a lead or anything, but you get that. We also had some interesting issues where sickness was actually covering up other issues. If people needed a day off, and in aviation, in the airline industry, relationship problems were not uncommon, and if people needed to sort out the relationship between where they were and where their other half was, the only way you could do it sometimes was go sick. Or if you've got childcare, that's another one. So if you have to sometimes burrow down to find out why people are taking the day sick and make appropriate arrangements.
Pauline.
But an employee with childcare issues is able to take unpaid leave rather than sick. They shouldn't be taking sick.
It's just the people under stress at the moment. It's 8 o'clock in the morning and your childcare hasn't turned up. You probably would say, I'll just say I'm sick because it's easier. If you haven't taken up your day's sick leave, we get that's the reality, isn't it?
Pauline?
I think I probably should declare an interest in that I designed and built the report that you're talking about. The issue is that sickness levels depend to a certain extent on what job you're doing. So it's perfectly acceptable for a captain to sneeze all over an aeroplane, but it's not acceptable for a stewardess to sneeze all over a passenger. There's all sorts of things like that, and we will have the same issues in the council for particular sorts of jobs. And then, of course, you come back to the flexibility of rosters and whether it's easy to change your roster or not. And depending on your system, it is or it isn't. But I think fundamentally that it's important to continue monitoring this, as long as you understand the history behind it. Ideally, you'd segment it by job type so you understand that it's probably okay for some people to come to work sick, or even sometimes people are sick and don't come to work and don't report the fact they're not there. And because they're senior enough, nobody logs it and therefore it doesn't appear, which is the other thing that happens. You'd need to understand the detail behind the data and the constraints on the individual, not just look at a figure.
But I think I was going to say, I totally agree. And I think the other part, when you're looking at this as a measure of the whole, as a council as a whole, taking out any factors of types of job role, our performance, the amount of sick days that our employees are taking is less than it has been, less than the local average, less than the LGA, and less spiky than it has been before, which I think is a sign of everything else that's going on across the council and some of the other factors that may be in there. So I think, whilst I totally agree with your point as well, I think it should be called out that this is a good thing to see that these numbers are coming down and it's less spiky and we're doing good. So yeah, I agree.
Thinking that we're doing well, we've marked ourselves red. That's the bit that's the anomaly. We should be saying we're doing well, it's green, and if we are barking up the wrong tree for the solutions as to why people are here, that would be a red in my view.
Go on.
But we have to accept that what this figure is telling us, that is equivalent to 30 people not working across the year. Now, it's a big number when you start multiplying by the number of staff, and then looking at the number of working days a person works. It's quite a big number.
might need to break that down. I just might, sorry, my head.
Okay.
Another metric. Can you
7.6,
say it again?
7.6 days per person. Let's make it easy, call it 6 days per person, and it's 1,000 staff, because I don't quite know the staff number. That's 6,000 person days. Divide that by 220, which is the number of working days in a year, you end up with a figure around about 30 person years not working. I'm just trying to put it into context.
Pauline?
I've got a fair amount of experience of this over many years. The other thing you've got to make sure you understand is how accurate the reporting is, because it's all very well for companies that say, oh, we only have 3 sick days a year, but if nobody ever reports when they're sick and nobody manages it, you don't actually know when people are sick. And then you've got people who work from home who are doing emails allegedly, but actually might be sick and might still be not reporting themselves as sick because they can do things at home. So some people can do stuff at home, some people can't. My experience of that figure is it isn't outrageous. And it is discussed a lot at Personnel Board, or whatever we call it nowadays. So I suggest that we move on, because it's not an outrageous figure. There is always room for improvement. You need to really understand the detail around how good the reporting is and what the contracts and the way the people work is before you draw too many conclusions about it. Because we actually do want people, if they're genuinely ill, to be genuinely ill and get genuinely better, not drag themselves in here because we want the number to get to 0.
Yeah. Any more on Chief Executive? Talking of the Chief Executive, I did think we ought to congratulate the Chief Executive, Susan Parsonage, on getting an MBE. So could you record that, Neil? I meant to say it earlier. Okay, are we going to just whiz through, and we're not going to say anything about children's services or adults?
I don't think it would be entirely appropriate, because we do have committees, overview and scrutiny committees, that will be interrogating that data. So I think it would be not particularly helpful.
No. Right. So is that it? We don't have anything left at the end, do we? Yeah, well, ditto. I mean, that's looked up by HOSC. Okay. Right, moving on to agenda item 10. Sarah.
I think I say a few words of introduction, and then Sarah would take over.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily, yes. I guess the 3 points I need to make as an introduction here are that what we're recommending is, or what the report is recommending, it's not yet gone to executive, of course, we're asking for this committee's views. Essentially, the report is recommending that we do not at this stage move out of Chute End. We remain at Chute End for 10 years at least. There are 3 things I think are relevant to this consideration. The first is there are no real reasons to believe that local government reorganisation will affect us. It's not likely to require us to become part of a bigger authority with perhaps an alternative headquarters somewhere else. So that is an argument in favour of retaining our current headquarters. There's a slight fly in that ointment, in the sense that the Ridgeway Council option, which is would bring West Berkshire and 2 of the Oxfordshire districts together in one new unitary council, could, in theory, trigger a wider review of Berkshire's arrangements, but there's no reason to believe that the government has an appetite to do that. they've got more than enough to do with conversion of existing districts and counties into unitaries without attending to existing unitaries. So I don't think that's realistically a threat. The second thing to draw your attention to, I guess, is workforce changes. There is undoubtedly a move back to working in the office. That is being encouraged, and it does point to the logic of retention. The first and second floors of this building, which have not been fully utilised over the last few years, are now being reused. They are being reoccupied, and that potentially will enable us to free up other buildings where services have been delivered from. And the third and most important point, I guess, to make is financial pressure was what first encouraged the council to consider a move, because we thought there might be an opportunity to save money by not having this potentially very expensive building to maintain and run. Financial pressures have grown more intense as a result of something I referred to earlier on. Fairer funding settlement now puts us in the position where we've had to reconsider whether we have the resource to actually make a move. And at this stage, we believe we don't. So it makes more sense to stay where we are. That will require, I'm afraid, some investment to make the building workable over the next 10 years. But that will be relatively small compared with the investment we might have had to make if we decided to go down an alternative route. So this is really a pragmatic decision that's being recommended to the executive. It's not a kind of ideological issue. It's purely a pragmatic one of recognising that circumstances have changed, and we need to adapt with them. I think that's probably enough for me. So Sarah, take over.
Yes, I don't have too much more to add, but as Stephen said, this is, I suppose, the latest chapter in the Future Headquarters project. Members may remember that this has been subject to 2 previous exec decisions and appearances at Overview and Scrutiny Committee in September 2023 and January 2025. And as Stephen has set out, the context of where we find ourselves now, and particularly our budgetary pressures as we manage our assets, has led to this further update. So the detail is in the draft executive report, which was attached to the papers. That will be considered by the executive next week on the 25th of June. You can see the recommendations on page 161 of the report, the recommendations to executive. And really, the committee are asked to consider that draft report and provide any recommendations or considerations as appropriate to the executive in their decision making. So I'm happy to take any questions or provide any further information to help the committee in their considerations.
Shahid.
Thank you. Stephen, just picking up the point you mentioned, the second one. Obviously, some of the part of the building hasn't been occupied for some time, and obviously there's opportunity cost there as well. I'm not sure how do we quantify that, potentially how much would have gained if it was occupied or given for rental or whatever. But are we certain that if this is to remain as the headquarters or council, it will be fully occupied? It will not remain any empty, or if there's any part are empty, it will be perhaps let out or commercially utilized. So we really sweat our assets because at the end of the day, it is a huge asset, and we should not let it go wasted.
I think Sarah's best equipped to answer this one for you, Shahid.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we did close the 2 upper floors. Part remained open, but the majority were closed in 2023-24. we took a budgetary saving of circa £75,000 per annum based on saving of cleaning costs, utilities, etc. That space has been empty since. We have looked at a number of options about what we would do with those floors. However, what has now happened is that through the transformation work, through some of our services, particularly adults and children's, and we are seeing increased attendance from the workforce, has gone up slightly. We were asked to reopen those floors and provide better spaces for teams to enable collaboration and to enable some teams, particularly in children's, who were out in our satellite offices to come into Shoot End. So as of Monday, i.e. 3 days ago, the first and the second floor areas that were previously closed have now all been reopened and teams have moved into those spaces. What follows from that is a bit of a game of chess as other teams move around the building. But by the end of the year, I anticipate that our plan is that all office space in the building will be being utilised by teams. So we won't then have any empty space. What that does mean is that then increases back our operational costs, because where we had closed areas, we're now having to service them and make sure they're safe, etc. So that's part of this additional investment that we've put into the building. But as of the end of this calendar year, the Shoot End offices will be full again and operational with staff.
Sarah, can I come back on that, please? I understand, obviously, the savings in terms of cleaning and etc. So I'm putting my business hat on, obviously saying, yes, a saving, but also what could have we gained as well if we let that facilities out to a commercial basis. So I'm sure that would have been, so it's not what we saved, potentially how much we could have gained. And I don't know, obviously, the figures I thought this is actually opportunity we lost. We could have perhaps used that on a commercial basis, let it out. And yes, of course, they can be responsible for all the cleaning themselves as well. So I'm just thinking that in terms of the opportunity cost for the 2 years, it's not going to be small. Did we lose that opportunity?
If there had been a commercial tenant in paying rent, yes, we would have got money. The reason we didn't bring them in is because we didn't have certainty about how we were going to be using our offices in the future. So, and what has now transpired is actually our increased attendance in our workforce means we need the space. So there was a deliberate decision to not advertise or bring commercial tenants into the space whilst we were having this consideration. What this decision today, or what we're asking executive to make, is to give us some certainty, because actually what we've had over the last 2 and 3 years is managing a building which we're not sure, are we going to be here, how long are we going to be here for, and this just helps with that. So I think it was the right decision not to bring commercial tenants in, albeit there may have been some income that we forfeited, because actually it's proven that actually now we do need the space. So for us to be able to deliver our services and our teams. What we've also got is a programme of looking at where particularly teams are coming from satellite offices into Shoot End. That is realising some assets that we then don't need and we can then reuse, repurpose or dispose of, and that will come through the relevant decision making. So we will see the implications of more concentrated use of Shoot End by staff. The impact will be that we should be able to release some buildings for disposal and a capital receipt.
You were next, Mark.
So I'm obviously been following all of this since I was elected. I think this is the right call to make, given the backdrop of everything else that's going on. I think it's also a good opportunity to be able to look at all the space that we've got, the investment. The 10-year term gives us more certainty for investment or capital projects. We did something very similar at Bracknell Forest with Times Square when we moved out of East Hampstead House and Seymour House, depot sites and a few other places, and it did enable us to bring in a huge saving across other insights by closing down satellite offices. We also looked at the ability of renting out empty floors at Times Square, and there was zero interest from any of the any businesses in the area at all, because there was so much available cheaper accommodation that they could find with other commercial agents that could offer rents at a far cheaper rate than we ever could if we did it for best value. So I think this is the right thing to do. I think my point also is, while we're looking at this for the longer term, is when we're doing all of the space planning and all of the analysis and all of the work for the actual maintenance that we'll need to do for the next 10 years, is what else are there other things that we could bring in for people that we're funding, or community groups or charities that we're funding that are looking for space where there's other savings, where we're effectively paying ourselves rent from one pocket to another pocket through grants. And I think if that gives us the certainty of 10 years or more here, actually that gives us the ability to do some better planning with other organisations that we support that could use that space, that we could bring people in and make that sort of condition of it. But also the investment in making sure this is a really high quality office for our staff to work in and want to come and work here, whilst, you know, driving for value for money. But if we want people to come in, and that's more people than, you know, town centre, etc., but we need to make this an attractive place to work, because it will attract people to come in. It will make people want to come in as well, more and more and more. And one of the things I was going to ask, and it's a little plea because I've been caught out a couple of times, can we look at how the car parking works and the permits and the zones to make it easier for people not to get caught out by parking in the wrong area? Because I know one or two people, me included, in the interest of transparency, but I was talking to one of my other ward colleagues who may also have had a parking ticket for inadvertently parking in the wrong area. So just while we're looking at the practicalities of how we bring the building back to life, just how we make this an easy, simple, attractive place for people to come and work in.
It's Caroline next.
Thank
And then
you.
Mike.
Thank you. It's great we're going for 10 years, but 10 years is a long time. And one thing I've learnt recently is that things can change. So I presume we will be reviewing this quite often, particularly after 5 years, because we just don't know with AI what could happen.
Yes, absolutely. It's how we use our assets is an ongoing review process that led by my team that we do. So we won't be just putting this on a shelf and not coming back and thinking about it. What we won't do, and the recommendation is worded around substantive feasibility work. So that means we won't be, unless told to, you know, engaging in detailed design work, consultancy fees, all of that thing. So it will be a review ongoing within the officer team, within that's our BAU. That's what we must do all the time until we're directed otherwise. And that would then be a commitment by the organisation to then spend money on that feasibility work. But absolutely, it's how we use our assets is an ongoing process. BAU.
Mike?
Thank you. I think this is exactly the right thing to do. Having spent 30 years in commercial office operation, I can see that there's no way we would have been able to rent out a couple of floors on an ad hoc basis. When post-COVID, there was such a huge amount of office space, much better than this, much more suited to high-tech businesses locally. So there was never a starter. That's a bit of a red herring. It's interesting, it goes in waves from consolidation to diversification. So we're now looking at consolidation back into a single site, which I think is good. I think it's much better. It improves communication, and those conversations you have in the corridor between people in different departments are immensely valuable, but extremely difficult to put a value on. But one thing I would say that needs to be considered, I don't know how old the mechanical and electrical systems and plant is, but typically in commercial offices it needs replacing every 15 years or so. And we've done presumably nothing for the last few years, this anticipating a move. So somewhere in that 10 years we may well be faced with major plant replacement.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The shoot end is 35 plus years old. The plant's got a life of mechanical plants about 25 years if you really push it, and we are pushing it even more. So we're this 10-year programme, I suppose I would describe it as a very large sticky plaster to keep the building operational, keep the building safe, create that good environment for staff to come back, but it doesn't involve wholehearted refurbishment, resale. When we looked, refurbishment. When we looked at what the long-term permanent refurbishment costs around Shoot End would be, that was back in the Jan 25 feasibility work. It is a significant cost. It's just under £25 million all in to redo this building. So this 10-year decision is a very small maintenance programme and investment programme, and things may go wrong in that 10 years that we can't foresee. You know, we can make contingencies enough, but there may be things that go pop that we don't know about yet. So there is an element of risk in there, and that's got to be quite both a planned but also a reactive maintenance programme.
Question then is, what's the trade-off between deciding that you are going to be here for 10 years, in fact beyond 10 years, and making the investment in a 25-year life piece of plant versus bandaging together this poor groaning piece of kit and find yourself having to fork out in a sort of a bit of an ad hoc way because your back's against the wall, unplanned replacement? Is it that sort of thing that you're constantly worrying about?
Absolutely. We've identified a programme of circa £800,000 worth of capital investment over the next 3 to 5 years. So we anticipate that is the level of spend that we will need on the building to get us through that 10 years. That, I suppose, you put against, well, we had a reserve of £1 million per annum towards the permanent solution, but our permanent solutions were circa 25 million capital. So it's those comparisons, and that's a very practical response to, we don't have that resource at this moment in time. But yes, we could get to year 10 and make a decision to leave this building. So everything we've spent in these 10 years has given us an operational and safe headquarters for those 10 years, but we won't get that back. And that's the trade-off that we need to make based on the resources that we have available to us.
When you do some of these refurbishments, the sort of, hopefully the running costs drop as things get more efficient. So that's obviously not significant enough to justify the extra spend.
So the current running costs of the building are just over £1 million per annum. It is a very inefficient building. It's only Dex D at the moment. And to bring its energy efficiency up to anything that's going to make a real impact, that is substantial replacement of plant. That's the big investment. So what we have planned now is not going to make a significant impact to its energy efficiency and therefore our running costs. It is enough to keep it safe, it's enough to keep it operational, and it's enough to keep it good enough for staff, councillors and our visitors to the building, but that's all.
Pauline, sorry. Oh. Andrew?
No.
No? Pauline's passing.
Sorry, quite a few of my points have been raised. I guess I was going to ask, if we're looking at, well, I don't want to say kicking it into the grass for 10 years, but there's some aspects of this which I do worry feel a bit like that, in terms of if we are going to just be making some small changes, whether the expense of doing a bigger refurbishment after 10 years' time is going to become even more, and then whether at that stage we will say this is becoming an even more insurmountable sort of cost to stay in this building. On the flip side of that, obviously we looked at the other options in terms of Peach Street, and there were some other ones. Obviously something's going to happen to those within these next 10 years. And I know a lot can change in 10 years, but say if those are sold or repurposed and things like that, when we come to 10 years' time, are we going to, I mean, it sounds like we looked at these options last year because we had a few other viable options which could have worked. If we repurpose those assets or sell them or rent them out, are we then going to be in 10 years' time not have other viable ones, and will only be, the only option will then be we've got to spend the money on this building? So I know it's difficult to predict what's going to happen in 10 years' time, but if we're going along this option now, is that going to really limit us in the future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So coming out of the work on the decision back in January 2025, the three options that the executive decided remained viable options was a long-term permanent refurbishment of this building, a move to 28 to 38 Peach Street, which would be a demolition of the existing building and rebuild on that site, or the freehold acquisition or leasehold renting a building unspecified somewhere in the borough. They were the three. So obviously as we stay in Chute End, that remains in our ownership and that remains an option on the table. A freehold acquisition or a leasehold option will be still on the table in 10 years' time based on what's available on the market. So there's a risk there. We might say, oh yes, we'll buy something, but that buying something might not be available, might not be for sale, but so there's a risk there. And then 28 to 38 Peach Street, we do need to make a proactive decision about what to do with 28 to 38 Peach Street for these 10 years. And those options will be coming to Community and Corporate over in Scrutiny on the 29th of June. There are various options with that. One of them could be we hold the building as it is as an asset, so we are holding that opportunity to make that decision in 10 years' time. And the report will show that is a viable option, but there are costs associated with holding that asset, financial costs, but also non-financial in terms of its impact on the town centre. It's not a particularly great building. It's got antisocial behaviour around it, etc. But we could decide to make that choice to keep that option open. We could decide to do something different with it. We could decide to sell it. And stating the obvious, if we decide to sell it now, and we do sell it, then you're right, that takes that option away. And then in 10 years' time, the options we would have is to stay here or acquisition or leasehold of a building. So that piece about the decisions about the old Marks and Spencer's building is pertinent to this because it will constrain options going forward.
I think, I see this. I think what I was thinking as well, when the options were initially presented to us as well, we were looking at the affordability of each one. I mean, I think it feels now that it's been presenting that staying in here is a necessity because of financial pressures, but actually it also felt that it was being presented before that moving elsewhere could be a necessity because of financial pressures, because actually it was too expensive to stay here. And it feels that the narrative has changed on that slightly. And I guess it's for a number of things. Are we saying it's because we are staying in here but not going to put the adequate investment which was initially proposed before? And does that become a bit too risky over the next 10 years? If before we were saying in 2025 when we looked at it, if we are staying in here, we have to have that investment and that will be a cost and that may be more expensive than moving elsewhere. And if we are saying, okay, no, it's cheaper now to stay here but not do as much work, does that become too risky? I mean, I know you've partly addressed that in terms of there's some work, but I just wonder whether that narrative has changed. Is it a purely financial thing? Or is it that, as you mentioned, the attendance rates were up and actually, conversely, none of those other options may be viable because we've got better attendance and maybe this is a better place after all?
Yeah, I think definitely the narrative has changed throughout the lifetime of this project as we have discovered more, kind of done our feasibility work. Certainly when we were back in 2023, we were still just not coming out of COVID, but our working patterns were very reflective of a COVID scenario. And there was a significant running cost here. And the narrative and the justification for looking at a future HQ was because it was too costly to stay here and we could save by moving. As we've gone through that feasibility work and looked at our options, we don't have a ready-made HQ building in our portfolio. We don't have somewhere else we could just move to that would be suitable. So all the options we looked at cost, and as we looked at them more and more, they cost more and more. And 28 to 38 Peach Street is a case in point. Our original assumption was we would move into that building in its, not in its current form, the current structure, refurbish it, and that would be fine. But actually, as we looked further into it, that building is full of rack, it's not suitable, and it wasn't big enough for then as our needs developed. So, and then when we came through Jan 25, actually, on the finances, there wasn't actually much in it from a financial. Both of them were costly. Both of them were staying here or moving were unaffordable in the sense we didn't have that capital money identified. But actually then, and so then it was about the non-financial benefits, operational benefits of staying or going. And that's how the narrative has sort of developed as we've learned more. I suppose this is another sort of, as I said, sort of chapter in that story. So we're seeing increased attendance, our capacity requirements are growing, we're filling this building, and we have enough budget in the MTFP to see us through these next 10 years. But as I said, you know, if we get to 10 years' time and the decision is taken to move, hindsight will be a wonderful thing, and people in, I don't know if any of us will be around the table in 10 years' time, but people will say, might say, well, why did they decide to stay if they were going to move anyway? But unless any of you want to sort of, it's that crystal ball gazing, I think. We've just got to be as informed as we can be with what we know at the moment.
Pauline.
I'd just like to say that I think several of us made the point at the start that the Marks and Spencer's building wasn't suitable. It doesn't have sufficient parking for residents. It wasn't the right shape for what we were going to do, and it had rack. So I'm quite happy to see that you've concluded that that's the right answer and have gone back to the position of trying to make a better job of this rather than trying to move to a building that really wasn't suitable and wouldn't have been good for either officers, councillors, or indeed residents, which are the most important things, or the most important people. So I'm happy. Thank you very much.
Alison.
I know Dave Edmonds had his hand up online for a while, but he's taken it down now. But he did send me his question to ask.
Go ahead,
So this is Dave's question. Dave says, if we are doing this, can we also move to drastically reduce homeworking in a bid to make the council more productive?
Well, I think we are trying to strike a balance to enable proper flexibility where that's appropriate and helpful. But obviously there is a trend already without having to do anything to force that along for more people to want to come in and work within the office. That is a discernible trend. There's an uptick in the number of people here, working here as opposed to working from home. But having flexibility so that people can work some of the time from here and some of the time from home is an important consideration in terms of attracting and retaining staff. And we do need to recognise that. If we adopt a kind of coercive approach, I think it will backfire badly. We have a good reputation amongst staff here and people who would aspire to come here as a flexible employer. And I think we will continue to try to be flexible. But obviously productivity is a key part of what we're trying to achieve. Increasing productivity is immensely important. That's not always achieved simply by making sure people are in the building.
I was just going to say something, and then Pauline and Shahid. I was just going to say that I'm worried about 28 to 38 Peach Street hanging around our necks. I can't see any retailer wanting to move into it.
I think, if I may just cut in, it is going to come to community and corporate, and we will be seeking their views on what the appropriate way forward is. But you know, I think we're very mindful of all that you're saying, Catherine.
Who was first then? Pauline and then Shahid.
Just to make a slightly contrary point on home working, we should be managing people on their productivity, not on where they're located. I've actually found since council officers were sometimes working from home, it's actually easier to get them to answer the phone than it used to be when they were all here. So I think there are times when you need to be here to work with your colleagues. There are times when you need to be somewhere else to do something concentrated and not be constantly interrupted. And I think hybrid working is perfectly reasonable as long as people are actually working. And my feeling is quite often with people, we get a lot of discretionary effort out of them because they just keep going and they have the tea and keep going. And so what we need to do is try and manage people based on how much they're producing and how productive they are and how good they are and how effective they are, not on where they are, is my view.
But can I just say I couldn't agree more with that. And I think your point about often people working from home, working longer hours and showing more commitment is absolutely true. I'm absolutely convinced that's the case. We shouldn't assume just because people are working from home, they're just sitting around not working. There's abundant evidence that that's not true at all.
Yeah, I think some might be, but the key thing is to find the people that aren't, rather than penalising everybody.
I feel as one of two officers in the room that I should say something, but what I was going to say is where we have got to and what's informing our kind of capacity requirements in Shoot End is through the Modern Workforce Programme. It's also about what is the role. So what's the business need to do your job? Do you need to be with people? Do you need to be in the office? You might need to be out on site. You might need to be in the community meeting people. So that point, Pauline, about where you are is relevant to your role. So where we've got to is it is about business need and the needs of the teams. And teams do very different jobs. So the requirements of my team, where they need to be, is very different to a social care team, for example. So the policy is allowing managers to manage that at a local level. That's what we've done. And then looking at what does that mean for our office needs, we have worked tirelessly over the last few months working with teams to understand, for you to work best and to get the best out of your officers, what do you need? So some teams have said we need collaboration space. We don't want lots of individual desks. We want meeting spaces where we can meet, or we want pods to do our own individual conversations, whatever that would be. Some people have said, and then worked out how many desks people need, etc. And again, creating that good environment. What can we create here with the limited resources that we have that will encourage people to come in? And it's a bit of a virtuous circle. If people come in and they have a good experience, it's a good environment, they see people, they talk to people. If they come in and they just sit on their computer and they're on Teams calls all day and they don't actually talk to anybody, well, they could have done that at home and saved 2 hours of commuting. So it's really working with all of the individual teams about how they work in the very different ways to get the right office environment.
Thanks. Shahid?
I think taking the point which Pauline made and Sarah made, I think, yes, absolutely, productivity that's what we should focus on. It's not bombs on seat, basically. You have to be in the office. Flexibility is absolutely key. And also depends on the team as well. As Sarah said, social services they need to be on the field all the time, right? They're not going to be home or they're not going to be in the office either, right? But at the same time, there is some people abusing the system as well. It's proven, in the public sector as well as private sector as well. So how do this is about management, I suppose, isn't it? Just making sure that we get the maximum out of the people. And some companies have gone halfway. So you do 3 days in the office and maybe 2 days 2 days at home. Because even though I personal experience and a number of other people as well, even having a team meeting, for example, is not the same thing out as actually having a face-to-face meeting. Not always, right? So I see it's a fine line, actually. What is the balance you get? And it's a difficult one. It's not the easier one to get to. But I do feel totally working from home is not going to work. Hasn't worked for a lot of the organizations, and even private sector, they're calling people back as well. But also working in the office 5 days a week, that's probably going the other way as well. So somewhere in the middle, which addresses the productivity, addresses the flexibility as well, but making sure we're getting the best out of people, right? Because otherwise, it's a cost to us. If the productive person is 50% productive, then obviously there's a cost to the organisation.
I think if I may, just before I go to ask Stephen, I think we just need to be careful we're not straying off the topic of what we're doing with the topic of the paper, which is the staying here. I think the comments are relevant. Speaking as someone who manages a considerably large number of people, I don't care where they work as long as they're productive and happy. And I think we need to avoid, well, yeah, but I think we also need to avoid this pitfall, which I see time and time again from some people that just says, if you're not in the office, you know, are you working in your pajamas? You can work in your pajamas, I don't care. Are you productive? Are you working? Well, you know, as someone today who realised when I stood up I was wearing shorts. They were decent shorts, but I had a shirt on and shorts, and it just looks a bit strange. I think we just need to be very careful. Huh? I know. I just, let's not go there. I think we just need to be careful. We're not falling into the trap of saying people aren't working if they're not working in the office. And I think we need to make sure that, you know, we need to make this an attractive place for people to come and work at, which will help our staffing costs. We see that in our staff sickness. We see that in everything else. We see that in our ability to attract and retain good people to come and do an amazing job on behalf of the residents. And our residents are the key people that we're trying to address with all of this. So I think the point I was going to make, actually was slightly off topic. The point I was going to make was, I know we're talking about 10-year investments and 10-year commits and 10-year certainty. I think if we're making a decision that we're going to stay here for at least 10 years, not to be constrained by saying it's only 10 years and therefore constraining our investment and our decision and our design on the fact it's 10 years. If there's an argument that says it's 15 years and we can do X, Y, and Z, I think you made the point, Shahid, about plant replacement, which is a significant element of that £25 million cost, which I'm sure is probably now higher. I think what I'm trying to say to officers, my own view is that we shouldn't be constrained on 10 years if there's an investment decision that says, actually, if it was 12 years or 14 years or 13 years or 15 years, that, you know, by doing that, we can invest more and invest better and get a better return and a better offering for the longer term. I think to Andrew's point about, you know, we can't crystal ball gaze about what might happen. And it's a really, none of us knows. I mean, none of us knows it's going to be here in 10 years. My point being, if we're looking at those investments decisions and say, if we're going to do 10 years, we would do this. If it was 12 years, we could do this, which gives us more, which gives us this, not to be constrained. That would be my own view back, having been through this a couple of times.
I think that's a helpful comment, and obviously we can view this as at least 10 years.
We're committing to here as opposed to telling you it's 10.
Yes, indeed, and you know, I think that's a good point to make, and we'll have to take that on board when we as an executive consider this. My point, at the risk of incurring your wrath, Deputy Chair, by appearing to go slightly off piste, I do think we should also recognise that we are very fortunate as a council to have such high quality officers who work for us. They're attracted not by our building, in truth, they're attracted by what makes this a successful council.
That's good.
A supportive, if they were attracted by the building, we could have a real challenge. It is a supportive environment where there's an appreciation of work and effort, and there is support for our staff with the excellent new HR policies that we've got coming through. But I think a general environment where people feel appreciated and valued, that counts for more than anything else. So while we're obviously focusing on a building and the importance of that, ultimately, success of this organisation is not about where it's located, it's about who is employed there. And we have been very fortunate in having such a great staff. And I go to corporate induction sessions on a regular basis, and it is remarkable the number of returnees we have, people coming back to this council after having worked elsewhere because they appreciate what this council offers.
Okay, Dave Edmonds wants to come in.
Hi, hopefully you can all hear me okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. The point I was trying to make is if we're going to commit to having this asset is making the most of the asset and sweating the asset as much as we can and just maximising the use and the sort of value add that it can give us. And I think that's really important. And also, I know a lot of people were just mentioning about, you know, the welfare of the individual, etc., etc. I think we also have to bear in mind that I might be able to do my job really well at home and brilliantly, but the more junior staff who need to learn and develop and evolve could really do with me being in the office so that they can learn from me and develop in that way that sometimes only working physically alongside somebody can achieve.
Can I just comment on that, Dave? I couldn't agree more, especially with your point about younger members of staff and the need for them to interact with people in the office. And they do look to their more senior colleagues to give them guidance and help and support. And that's obviously a lot easier to provide when there are face-to-face relationships. I think it is, I can talk from personal experience of my son's difficulties with COVID and the closing of his office, which completely dislocated his kind of sense of how his career would develop and how his interactions with people he looked to for guidance and advice and mentoring, that all broke down because of the need to work from home. So I couldn't agree more.
Okay, any more? No? I think we've...
I was just going to ask a question on process as to how the considerations of the committee will be reported to the executive, or as Stephen's here, do we assume we've heard the considerations?
Well, that's making a big assumption that I'll remember them all. So it would be really helpful to have them summarised. And Neil is, of course, our expert at this.
Yes, so I can do a note just summarising the discussion. And as far as I can tell, there's no recommendations especially, but Pauline's got a hand up.
Just one other point, actually. I think we've got a different perspective on this building possibly than you, or even the exec members or the employees or anything. So it would be nice if we're going to do something for the next 10 years to this building, following on from Mark's comments, if you actually asked councillors what the experience is that we have of working here as well, and potentially you could find some things that you could improve that would help us and everybody else, because I think we've got a different view on it. I mean, I've been to a licensing committee this week. Absolutely impossible to park. If you don't get here at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can't park. It's not very easy for people that are coming in for an hour. It's okay for people who are there all day. It's not very good for people that are coming in for less time. So, and the car parks are very inefficient in terms of their layout, I think. So it's things like that. And I'm sure there's loads of other things. So would you be able to, or would you be willing to ask us what we think as well?
I'm sure that is a very good idea. We do need to get the views of elected members as to how they think this building should function. I thought you were going to mention the romance of the council chamber, but clearly we're not in romantic mood. But there will be a few people. You might be, yes. There are a few people amongst us and former colleagues who waxed lyrical about the council chamber. I do remember having discussions with them about it, and they will now, no doubt, breathe a great sigh of relief that the council chamber remains. And having spent a grueling series of hours this morning in Reading Borough Council's council chamber, I can assure you ours is a good one.
I think just following on from what Stephen said, I'm more than happy to do that piece of engagement with councillors, both about the building. There are changes coming to car parking. Again, I'm not being slopey shoulders, but I've dealt with staff and councillor parking for a very long time, but now our colleagues in HR and highways are doing that. So I will feed back to them as well, and particularly make sure they have consulted and taken your views into account. But I'll take that as an action to understand this building. I think also just one thing that councillors I know are experiencing, it's working tonight, touch wood, but we know the problems of the AV system. We have appointed a contractor to come in, and during the month of August, whilst there are down in public meetings, the AV system, both in the council chamber and in these 2 rooms, will be completely replaced and upgraded, and hopefully you will see those benefits both in quality but also reliability. So that's just a little update on some of our investment in the building.
Hooray, thank you. Right, okay, agenda item 11. Thank you very much, Sarah and Stephen.
And I will now depart at this point.
We finished, or we're going to finish before you get a chance to get up?
Well, if you can promise me you're not going to take very long, I'll wait.
Okay, executive forward programme. I think we've already had the first executive meeting, so we needn't look at that. And then there's page 170, 171, 28th of June, sorry, 25th of June. Any comments? Alison.
I attended a very well-chaired Borough and Parish Liaison Forum on Monday, which Stephen also attended, and one of the parish councillors sought some education, really, on how the Borough Council runs, you know, that we have an executive rather than having lots of committees. And it was explained that the scrutiny committees work very well, you know, jointly, looking very carefully at everything before it goes to the executive. And when you look down the column where we put which O&S committee looked at things, there's very few things that come into executive that will have gone through scrutiny. It just strikes me. Future headquarters, yes, we're looking at that today. The Renters' Right Act is going to you next in the 29th, to Mark's committee. Has the local area send reform plan, is that going through children's services?
Which page are you on, Alison?
That's on 174. And also the children's sufficiency strategy, is that going on through children's scrutiny?
The local area send reform plan, yes. Yeah, it has. Yeah.
And the sufficiency strategy?
Which one's that on?
It's straddling the spine. WBC 1582.
I'd need to check what that's in. I have a feeling that's a combination of some other things which we have looked at. I don't think we've looked at something with that exact name, but I can have a look into what. I don't know. Do you know exactly what's in a children's sufficiency strategy?
So I think I know, and I think it had gone to children's services already.
We haven't had something with that exact title, but
No.
I think we have had reports which relate. So I can find out. But
Yeah.
Is it related to placements and things, places, school?
Yes, it
places,
is.
like that?
That's exactly what it is related to.
Okay.
Yeah.
In which case, the schools place things we've had. Yeah.
I think the point of this is that we can say we want to look at this. So turn the question round. Are there things that you actually think we should look at?
There's nothing jumping out for our committee, but I just want to be
for other
satisfied
committees.
as the parent committee of all the lower ones.
Yes, exactly.
That,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, the A4 bus infrastructure, did that go through scrutiny before it? Because that's going to the executive in June. Did that go through scrutiny?
Not as an item on, it didn't come to CCOS as an item on the A4 bus, but then we've also had the local transport plan, and that's coming back in again. So I think some things that come through here don't directly relate to an item that goes to scrutiny with that name on it. But again, it's one of the reasons why we go through all of the work programs. So if there are things in here, we can ask these questions in this forum. But it's a good point.
I guess my response would be that it is entirely in your gift to decide what you would like to see. Obviously, there are some things that come to executives that are very formulaic. They're simply things we have to sign off on. And, you know, if you wanted to look at them and comment on them in advance, that's excellent. We have no problem with that. But I suspect some of them you won't want to. But I think as Catherine said, I think it's very much in your gift to decide what you would like to look at before it comes to scrutiny. Before it comes to the executive, sorry about that. Just a bit tight.
I think we're done with that. Yep. Individual art, page 179. Sorry. We've got this, sorry, go on.
The one I was wondering about whether we should have is the local transport delivery plan. 173,
I'm pretty sure that.
because it's not down as coming to OS.
No, I'm pretty sure it is. I just don't think it's listed on here as coming to OS.
So we just think the lists are on.
I think there's things that are on the list that don't have an OS, that don't have a committee.
Well, I think we need to check
listing.
that then, don't we?
I think that's part of the challenge as opposed to they're not coming. So I know that the local transport plan is definitely, I can't remember when it is.
Yeah, you might know it's coming. We're looking at this list, we don't know it's coming. So
Yeah.
if this list is wrong, it's pointless us going through it.
So I think this is the challenge, that the list isn't accurately reflecting what's coming when. Because I'm looking at that and I'm 90% sure I've seen it on the forward work programme for ONS, CCOS.
But it's going to executive in July. It can only be on your agenda for the 29th of June, can't it? 'Cause you're not meeting again until September. Sorry?
Sorry, can I just come back on my original point? There is no point in us having a conversation about, I think, this should be accurate and we should know.
So the work programmes for each of the committees are the next item. So yes, maybe one or two have been missed, but we can cross-check by looking at that.
But I think one of the other things we've identified is that things coming to executive don't always have exactly the same name as the things which go to scrutiny. So I think, I'm not saying that helps, but I think it's sometimes because, for example, I think in the local areas send reporting that has been coming under a children's update because it's not always a separate item. So it has been covered, but it's been covered as part of a larger item. And I think other things happen like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing is all got a unique number, so it couldn't be beyond the wit of man to use that as a prime key and cross-reference using that. It's not that difficult, surely.
I agree, and I think that's, if you look at the local transport plan, for example, that's on the 29th of June. So there's stuff that's in the previous agenda item that's not been updated from this. So I think we need to get that closed off and updated again.
Okay.
I will try harder.
On page 179, why have we're looking at this individual executive member decision list, but it's already passed. Well, it was May.
Only the first one has passed. The other ones are coming to in July.
It's just the title then. Sorry, yes, okay, yes, you're right. It's like May 2026, that's just the date of the list, is it? Right, okay. So I suppose the same applies to this. Do we want to look at any of these? Would that be CCOS?
Got 2 quiet meetings before we hit the budget.
No,
On page 181, Martin Alder is listed as the Executive Council for Planning Enforcement. That's no longer the case, is it?
it's a bit out of date.
No, but it's often the case that reports will be compiled at a time when somebody's in place and
Yes,
things change.
yes, it's got Catherine in it.
So it should have my name attached to it now.
This was the latest version when the agenda was published. There's been a subsequent updating, which will have accurate data. So for the next meeting, we will have the accurate lists.
Right. Page 184. Our next meeting. Update from the leader and report on the decision-making process.
You're not asking me to give that now.
No,
Goodness for that.
well, we could just, you could just give us 5 minutes.
I
and
get the
then we-
impression none of you are football fans anyway.
Is it? Right, okay, right. I guess you haven't got any more comments then? Okay, any more comments on forward programme? Oh, lovely. Right. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much and have a lovely evening.